Today's topic is one that I've been excited about for quite some time. So this is a title that I pre-ordered a while ago. I covered it in a sort of upcoming titles that were going to be released video a while ago. And anyway, it finally came in, and that is Pharoah Sanders. Well, Pharoah, self-titled essentially. This was originally on the India Navigation label, and it's had no legitimate US release since the original, since 1977. And so a lot of folks were really excited about this title, myself included. This was put out by Luaka Bop in a box set. So what I want to do today is talk a little bit about my thoughts about this album in terms of the music, my thoughts about the box set, and yes, even perhaps a comparison to the original pressing. I want to be clear though, the original pressing has just been quite unattainable for a lot of folks. It's really gotten much more popular, even just over the last couple of years. A lot more people have sort of come to discover this amazing album and have wanted to own it. So I think more of my comments today are going to be about the box set as it is, this edition that is now available to anybody who wants to pay the money for it. Because I think that that's something to celebrate, provided they did a good job with it. So that's what I'm going to focus on, but I will provide some thoughts in terms of if there's any differences between this latest reissue and the original pressing. All right, so this is the title. As I said, it comes in a box set. So why a box set? Well, of course, because there are extras. So there's actually two albums that come in this thing. Like I said, it was released by Luaka Bop. It's currently available online for $54.99. As of the recording of this video, it was still in print. This is keeping in mind it came out last Friday and today's a Wednesday. So $54.99. One thing that's important to note is that if you order it from Luaka Bop's website or certainly in a US retailer, it's going to ship, well, either from that retailer or if you order it from Luaka, it's going to ship from North Carolina. So for folks who are in the US who want this album, the best bet is to order it from probably Luaka. Or wherever you can get it. If you're international, the important thing to remember is that you can order from Bandcamp. And when you order from Bandcamp, it actually ships from Austria. So for any folks who are in Europe, or if, I don't know, if you're maybe not in Europe, but you believe that it might be cheaper to ship it from Austria, then Bandcamp's the way to go. So anyway, a couple of options for how to order this thing. So the box set is very nicely done, I will say. So there's sort of this embossed kind of textured thing on the front, and this is a great reproduction of the original cover. One thing that's kind of curious, I suppose, is that there's been a lot of talk about the brown cover versus the blue cover. So for folks who know this album, in 1977, they released it in both. You could either get a blue cover or a brown cover, and no one really ever has said anything about why that happened. It could have just been an accident. It could have been that they just didn't care and they were trying to get them out. And there's been a lot of chatter about which one came out first. That's just like collector nonsense. They both came out in 1977. There's no way this thing originally had like multiple large pressing runs. I think the brown and the blue are simply both the first pressing, but it's interesting that when Luaka decided to reissue this, they went with the brown. All right, so what's in the box? Well, of course, you get another sort of album jacket with the original album inside, right? And how they actually treated this is that it's a gatefold. The original was not a gatefold, but they opted for gatefold here. This is a very nice, sturdy material. It is not laminated, but it is, you can tell that it's high quality paper and does a great job of reproducing what the original image was. So this is very nice. As sort of a I don't know, counterpoint, if you will, the second album that's included, because there's two albums here, is this title right here, and they're calling it Harvest Time Live 1977. So this is not a reissue. This is this I don't believe has been put out at least on vinyl before. This jacket is laminated. I would say it is more flimsy, and it's just generally kind of less impressive. But let's be real. I mean, I think the box set is a little bit more about that studio album, and this is a very nice bonus. Incidentally, what you have on this album is 2 different versions of live performances of the track Harvest Time, which is not only the first track on the original album, but is also kind of the album, or excuse me, the track that I think is the reason why people love this album so much. So there's 2 different versions. You get one on side A and one on side B. I think one's like 10 minutes and the other is 18 minutes, whereas the original is 20. But yeah, but what you get is, again, these sort of live renditions of the album. So in addition to that, and you could argue that maybe the box set would have been enough with just those 2 albums, especially at a $54.99 price point. But there's actually quite a bit more things that you get. So one is this collection of photos, which is, for those of us born in the 80s, are going to kind of recognize this type of thing, this little like folio where you'd expect to get your photo negatives and in actual photos. I say 80s, obviously 80s and before, maybe 90s, I don't know. But anyway, yeah, there's a bunch of these sort of 5x7 probably or so photos that are really nice. I assume that these might be in studio or perhaps they were taken live. They're not all the best in terms of resolution, but they really have that kind of candid sort of casual nature to them, and I do think that they were done. I do think that they were done quite well. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with these things, other than obviously keep them in the box set. But anyway, I just kind of thought it was a nice addition, and you usually don't see stuff like that very often. So what else do you get in here? So there's this kind of I'll call it haphazard, like newspaper clipping. That was done intentional, I'm quite sure, because they really are trying to make it seem like it's a clipping. And this is this is a review, I think, of a Village Vanguard performance that somebody wrote up. I'm not even sure of the publication. Oh, New York Daily News from 1977. So right around the same time period of the recording of this album. You also get this ticket stub here, this sort of reproduction ticket stub from the actual, from a performance that Pharoah Sanders gave also in 1977. So again, he would have been performing the music, right, from this album around this time period. So that's kind of fun. What else? You got sheet music, which is very sort of rudimentary, not unlike what you might see in, say, the Real Book, right, which is a collection of compositions or jazz standards. But this is essentially the chart for Harvest Time. So for those of us who are musicians, that's kind of fun. There's more. So there's this image here. And that's very nice. Folks might want to frame that or do something with it. I'm not sure. There's also this contact sheet, which includes a lot of images that I believe that some of these were then developed, right, to be included in that little folio. So you have this contact sheet with a ton of photos on it. And then what else do we have? There's a concert poster here, and this is pretty sweet as well, especially for anybody who collects concert posters. So this is the International Jazz Montmartre. I guess sort of lineup. Except what's interesting is that this Japanese here, and I didn't even think, because I actually can read some Japanese. I know this says jazz, international jazz, and then this probably says Montmartre. Yeah, it does. So figuring this out live. But anyway, this is kind of cool. You see the Elvin Jones Quintet, Sonny Rollins Quintet, Ted Curson, right? Pharoah Sanders is here, although it's misspelled. Johnny Griffin. It's just kind of a fun, sort of snapshot in time, if you will, of this sort of festival concert poster. And then finally, and maybe I should have led with this, you do get I think it's 24-page booklet about this album. And I have not yet read this yet, but it feels like it was well done. It is not just a collection of large photos. There's a bunch of text here, which I think is cool. Get to learn something perhaps with this booklet. And again, it seems like it was well done. So, all in all, if you're looking for value at $54.99 for an album that's never been reissued in the US and is very sought after, I think you're getting a lot here from Luaka Bop. I think that, they're asking you to spend the $54.99, but you're getting a lot in return. A lot of people are aware of this album, but my guess is a lot of folks have not had the ability to listen to it on vinyl yet, and obviously that is now changed. So it feels to me like word of this album sort of spread quickly over the last couple of years as values went up, so mostly amongst, I would say, the collector community. And I personally do not think that this album is overhyped. I think it's a wonderful example, certainly of Pharoah Sanders' later catalog, if not really one of the gems of his entire catalog, in every piece of music he was ever a part of. And a lot of my enjoyment with this album centers around the opening track, which is titled Harvest Time. I don't want to take anything away from the rest of the album, but it's simply a standout. It is absolutely gorgeous. And if I think about why that might be, I think it's a very sort of transportative song. It's a very emotional song, a very affecting song, and it's just beautiful for ways that are maybe sort of intangible. I would say that as a point of comparison, I get a similar reaction, similar listening experience when I listen to a track like, say, Warm Canto, which is on Mal Waldron's album The Quest, which was on New Jazz. If you don't know that track or that album, certainly go check that out. Maybe another example of a track that kind of puts me in a similar space is one called The Plum Blossom, which was on Yusef Lateef's Eastern Sounds. That one was featured in the Kraft One Step set that came out, like a year ago, something like that. That's another one that it just feels like there's something that's iconic about it. There's something that's very affecting about it. It's moody, it's slightly somber. There's sort of these elements of uncertainty, and I personally, I don't know, really relate to music, I guess, that kind of evokes some of those themes. What folks want to know next is, how does it sound? Does it sound good? So I am very excited to report that this Luaka Bop reissue does indeed sound great. I didn't have any quality issues with my copy, and I just found it to be a very dynamic and very exciting recording, really a nice way to hear the music. Is it a quote-unquote audiophile presentation? I would say no, but listen, neither is the original. The original wasn't this like incredibly detailed thing, and I'm not led to believe that they sourced this from the original master tapes. I think it was a digital source, so I don't know necessarily that we'd expect there to be significant differences between the reissue and the original, and there isn't really significant differences. But bottom line is that this reissue sounds really, really nice. So what I did when I listened to this, not the first time, but like the second time or something, is I did a little bit of a comparison, right? So this is the reissue, and this is my original copy, and I'm very happy to have this copy. It does have the radio station call tags on it. I've shown this in a prior video. And unfortunately, the actual vinyl is in great shape, and so it makes for a good sort of comparison, I suppose. This is what I would say if you're interested in what those even minor differences might be. So I would say that on this reissue, the bass is deeper and much more pronounced. So much more sort of prominent in the mix, not in a distracting way. It is not, it's not overly so. It sounds really good, and if anything, the recording just sounds fuller. It feels like it sounds maybe just a little bit more modern, I would suppose. And I would say overall that the dynamics across instruments is much more, I was about to say extreme, but more like enhanced. Like there's really nice dynamics with the instruments, and yeah, I just found it to be a very engaging recording. Now, as a point of comparison, what do you get with the original? Overall, it feels flatter. It doesn't feel as dynamic. The bass is definitely not as pronounced. And the one thing that the original has going for it as sort of a trade-off is Pharoah Sanders' saxophone is more detailed. There's better detail around especially his attacks, as well as his kind of sustains or sort of trail offs to some extent. Pharoah Sanders plays with a lot of breath, and when you're listening to the reissue, some of the time, especially at a lower register, it's just a little bit harder to hear exactly what he was doing, and I felt like it was a little bit more detailed, a little bit more evident, audible what he was doing on the original. For me, when I listen to these two and I think about that trade-off, I actually might say that I prefer listening to the reissue. I like that it sounds more dynamic, even with that kind of minor trade-off. And here's the thing: the point here is not to talk about which one wins. I think again is the question. The question is whether the reissue sounds good, and it really does. I was very impressed with the reissue, and I'm excited to have a copy that maybe I don't mind as much about playing, because let's be real, the originals have really shot up in value. And I'll still listen to it, but anyway, those are kind of my thoughts. I was very excited. I was only positive feedback for Luaka on this treatment of the primary album. So let's shift gears here really quick to Harvest Time Live 1977. So I mentioned before that this is really just 2 tracks, 1 track on each side, and they're both renditions of that track Harvest Time. So first of all, they're very different. Not only in terms of length. So the first one, the one on side 1 is 18 minutes and 15 seconds. And the one on side 2 is 10 minutes and 34 seconds. On both of these, you actually have the same lineup, so I'm sure it was part of the same tour. You have Pharoah Sanders, Hayes Burnett, Clifford Jarvis, and Khalid Moss on piano as well as electric piano, depending on which one we're talking about. So actually, that's somewhat telling and actually indicates, I don't know, some of the differences, I guess, between these 2 tracks, because they are very different. It's not just 2 versions of the same song that sound the same. It's really not, nor do they sound the same as the one that made the album. So the first one, the longer one, is much more, and this is due to both the use of electric piano as well as a very sort of funky bass. It is just an incredibly funkier take on the track. I think if the studio album one was much moodier, this one is much more sort of live performance-esque. They seem to be having a lot more fun playing the music rather than sort of being morose. So I think if there's anything that you'll take away from that first one when you listen to it is, man, how funky is this? This is very interesting. Pharoah also incorporates a lot more animated improvisation much earlier in the track than he does on the studio one as well. As far as the quality goes, the quality is actually quite good on this first side. You could tell it was recorded well, minimal audience noise. Yes, obviously it's live, and you can tell that it's live, but it's a very, very nice listen. It was done well. So as a point of comparison, the second track, or sort of side 2 of this, the 10-minute version, much lower sound quality actually. Definitely more of a live feel. You hear more of the audience noise in it, and it just feels a little bit more distant. I think if the second track was all that you got with the second disc, that kind of recording quality would have been a little bit of a disappointment. Instead, it feels like a little bit of a bonus, right? Because you get that great track, that great rendition on the first side, and the second one, yes, it's not as nice sounding. It's also not nearly as funky. I think that this is where the acoustic piano was being played, and it doesn't come across as well in the mix. The drums are pushed way to the back as well. Has a very, very different feel. It feels, if anything, maybe looser and not as, I don't want to say produced, because it's hard to talk about like a track being produced when it's live. But I think because you don't have those amplified instruments, and instead I'm sure they're just mic'd, I feel like you're losing a lot of the depth of the music, and it's just some of those instruments are pushed to the back, even though that you do get to hear Pharoah Sanders quite well. Probably goes without saying, this album is an easy recommendation for me. I think especially at that $54.99 price point. Feels like maybe if another label tackled this, they would have tried to push it into that like $75, $80 price point, because you're getting the multiple discs plus all of that content. Somehow Luaka Bop seemed to be able to, work with a printing company or a vendor or whatever who was able to put together the nice packaging that they did and all the extras and do it in still an economical way. And I think that that's really great, because the biggest complaint with this album traditionally has been the cost that you have to spend to get a copy. And so you wouldn't want them to go for that like $80, like even $100 price point with the box set and still make it unaffordable. Instead, relatively speaking, $54.99 is quite affordable. I know there's going to be folks out there who wish that all they had was the standalone album, and that they could buy that for like, you know, $20 or something. But, you know, let's be real. The audience for this box set, in the grand scheme of things, relative to other releases that they could have tackled, the audience is going to be much lower. And with lower pressing run means higher prices that they're going to have to charge. And I think what Luaka Bop did as a you know, at least what they did is they gave us something extra for that higher price point. So I don't know. I know that some people, I know where people's heads are at in terms of just wanting the standalone album, but in this case, I'm not going to be as critical about it. I think this is just I think it's a great box set. So those are my comments. I'm curious what everybody else thinks about this one, and I'll see you next time.